This is one of the best quotes that I've heard from a Philadelphia executive in a very long time. So Howie Roseman gets asked about winning his first Super Bowl versus winning his second Super Bowl. And he's over on the McShay Show, part of the Ringer Podcast Network, brought to you by Pearl Jam. Howie Roseman compares winning the first Super Bowl and winning the second Super Bowl, and he uses an anecdote that maybe some of the fine folks who are in the comment section or listen in the podcast feed can kind of understand. He compares it to something that we, again, if there are kids in the car, just mute here for the next 30 seconds or so. Howie, how do you compare the first Super Bowl to the second one?
Is this PG rated or PG-13?
Whatever you want.
Yeah. So I'd say like the first one's almost like, can I say this? Bob?
Yes,
can we delete this? Is this live? You don't know what I'm saying? You don't know what
this is the best part. You can be you.
It's almost like the first time you have sex. You're so glad you had sex. It's not even the quality of it. The second time,
that's actually great.
The second time, it's like, wow, I could actually have fun and enjoy this. And so I would say, and Bob just had sex for his first time.
So all right, so we have a beautiful moment there, and it's right at the very end of the clip. I don't know who Bob is, but Bob caught a stray in the worst way at the end of that clip. But Howie compares the first time versus the second time. And like, is it an apt comparison? I don't know. I guess you have to kind of go back in the memory bank and think about the first time and the second time. And you go, okay, yeah, I get it, Howie. Now, if you remember, I like to think of it from an anxiety perspective, let's say, right? Instead of we'll go anxiety. That first Super Bowl that the Eagles won, for many of us, or for people my age, it was only the second time the Eagles had ever been in the Super Bowl in our lifetimes, right? We watched Donovan McNabb throw up in the huddle against the Patriots. And so you have all of this negative energy that just kind of follows you because you have all those years of underwhelming performance. And then you got to Super Bowl 52, and like the franchise quarterback goes down, or the guy that you thought was going to long-term be the franchise quarterback in Carson Wentz goes down, and you have backup Nick Foles in, and you're going up against Brady and Belichick and this Patriots dynasty, this thing that just seems unbeatable. And there's a lot of stress throughout the game, and hell, even the way that Super Bowl 52 ended, where Tom Brady gets to bomb one deep, and Al Michaels is kind of deadpanning the entire thing, and the ball kind of bounces off some hands and then falls, and then you try to look at the clock, and then you realize, oh my God, the game is over. And then there's still part of you that's like hanging on, waiting for a late flag, because why wouldn't that happen? And then when you finally realize, oh my God, it happened, all that anxiety kind of like subsides, and there's elation that it happened. But like if you look back on the entire experience of it, there were a lot of nerves, right? So maybe it is an apt comparison by Howie. Whereas this Super Bowl was like, know what to expect. I think we're going to have a little bit more fun with this. And then the way that it ended up playing out, if you were an Eagles fan in Super Bowl 59, you had a lot of fun along the way. Not only did you have a lot of fun, but you got to the end and you were like, oh yeah, that was awesome. So maybe Howie actually did make a really good comparison. But again, I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was one of the funniest things. And like Howie's delivery, Howie doesn't have a lot of bass in his voice, and I say that as a tenor myself. Not a lot of bass in the voice, and so it almost comes off as like a nerdy thing. Howie, good on you. Good on you. Now, there are people who have been waxing poetic about Howie Roseman of late, and one of them is Dan Orlovsky, who was back on TV, although he was on McAfee's show. And he sort of made it sound like he's back for a few days a week for the next few weeks, but then told McAfee and his team that like he hasn't signed a new contract with ESPN. But Dan Orlovsky is absolutely in love with what Howie Roseman is doing, and specifically what Howie Roseman has done by re-signing and extending Saquon Barkley and rewarding a player who rushed for over 2,000 yards and set the single-season record between regular season and postseason for most yards in a season. Dan Orlovsky had a lot of good things to say about Howie Roseman and about what he has done as the head of this Eagles team. Now, I mentioned this on the emergency pod. We're all going to like have great moments, and like people are giving the flowers to Howie, and they should. But like none of this happens without Jeffrey Lurie putting a lot of money up front, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But I want to get over to Orlovsky, who had a lot of great things to say about Howie Roseman and why the 2-year extension to Saquon Barkley was such a big deal. So let's go over to Orlovsky really quick, and then we'll keep going from there.
For going back, I think like 10 years, they were always, or one of the teams that was always paying guys a year early. Like so often teams wait till, and places wait till the person's contract up or a player's contract is up, and it's till like the very end of it. And I remember, I thought they did it maybe with like Fletcher Cox and Lane Johnson, where they just choose to pay, hey, we drafted you, you're in your second year, we're just going to extend you because.
Remember, they did this with Carson Wentz, too, and that was actually one of the things that dogged Howie for a bit. And, like, when you think about the dead cap that can happen by cutting a player, the Eagles do play with fire a lot with the way that they guarantee money up front. There could be void years at the end of contracts, and if things were to go sideways, it could derail the team. Howie's most masterful job was getting rid of Carson Wentz because he gave him the contract early, and then that could have crippled this franchise. But because they were willing to find a trade partner, he was able to mitigate any potential damage.
Because we know you're a good player and whatnot. So Philadelphia, I mean, right now it's the best roster in football, clearly, and it certainly seems like they've added it. But it's awesome to see. It's one of the reasons why it seems like those people love playing there is how he does take care of them. And so it's big time for them.
Yeah, I agree.
So this is a whole thing, and I talked about this on the emergency pod, so seriously, go back and check that one out. It always helps the channel when you go back and watch things. But this is a statement not just to players in the league, not just to agents in the league. This is a message to the entire league as a whole, that Philadelphia is willing to pay you exorbitant amounts of money up front, $36 million, I believe, to Saquon Barkley up front as soon as he signs the 2-year extension. They're willing to give you all this money up front. Jeffrey Lurie is more than willing to give you a ton of money right now today based on your past production. Saquon Barkley has 2 years left on his first contract that he signed with the team. But this team, after he rushed for 2,000 yards, said, you know what? We're going to reward you with this extension. We're going to give you $36 million guaranteed. You helped us win a Super Bowl. And we want you here longer term. We don't just want you for 2 years. We want you for what'll be the next 4 years. And that just sends a great message to potential free agents. Now, mind you, and I did say this at the start of the show, it's a little bit tricky because no one seems to know right now what kind of cap savings the team has. I mentioned at the top of the show, Spotrac, they didn't backtrack on what was reported yesterday, right? There were people who were kind of going off of what Spotrac had for last season's cap hit versus the upcoming one, where it looked like it was a $7 million savings. We should hopefully know within a day or so what those savings are ultimately going to look like. But it's an interesting place for the Eagles to be because they do have some key free agents coming up. And if this extension is able to allow them to kind of reconfigure that cap hit for next year, does it make a signing of Mekhi Becton easier? Does it free up money to bring back Zach Baun? Does it give you the ability, if you want to bring back Josh Sweat, to do so? Does it give you that cap flexibility that if and when Cleveland ultimately finally warms up to the idea of trading Myles Garrett, that could happen? A name that gets thrown around a lot, as well as Max Crosby. Are there players that the Eagles have eyed up that they know we need to clear up some cap space to be able to bring those guys in? It's possible. And if you're a free agent, you're not looking to take a short-term deal. But if you were, or if you were to sign with the Eagles, and if you were to help deliver a Super Bowl, now there's this precedent of what they just did with Saquon Barkley, where if you're a free agent, you go, all right, Barkley got $36 million up front, and there's another $15 million in incentives and escalators that he could get in that deal. There has to be a part of you as a free agent that says, yo, I could go to one of the best teams, or one of the fan base. I don't think the fan base thing actually matters, but you'd be like, I can go to one of the best places to play football, one of the teams that is easily a favorite to win the Super Bowl next year, a team that has a wide open potential window, a team that is very committed to building a dynasty of their own. Oh, and by the way, I could get a lot of upfront money, and I could potentially get additional incentives. Oh, and by the way, I could win a Super Bowl. That's kind of hard to turn down. Will there be teams that are going to be able to outbid the Eagles on players? Maybe. But if you care about a little bit more than just the money, the Eagles are a great option. There is even a case to be made that if it's a few $1,000,000 less, but you have the ability to earn those incentives or escalators, maybe you do bet on yourself if you're a free agent. I don't know. I can't get in the minds of these free agents, but it's an interesting place to be. And again, this is all because Howie is willing to structure contracts the way that he does, and that Jeffrey Lurie is more than willing to put that money out up front.